The Crain and Company guys broke this story a couple of days ago. I meant to get to it yesterday. Fortunately, we're able to get to it today. The story is from this interview with one of Leah Thomas's teammates. Leah Thomas is actually named Will Thomas. He's that hulking dude who swam on the UPenn women's swim team and then beat all the girls and took their trophies, and he's just obviously a big guy. But he pretends to be a woman, and so we've all got to pretend that he's a girl, and he's smashing the glass ceiling, and it's so wonderful and brave and stunning. So one of Will Thomas's teammates comes out and gives a great interview, which I strongly recommend you go check out at Crain and Company, where she says, man, this is gross. This guy showed up to the locker room. He strips down naked. All of us girls had to be subjected to looking at him back when he still had the male parts. And then she spilled a little bit more tea. The part that everyone is focusing on from this interview is that Will Thomas's boyfriend, it's a boy who thinks that he's a girl, I don't know. Will Thomas's paramour was photographed holding up a jar with what appeared to be pickle juice and then two spherical objects in the jar. So two, I don't think they were olives. I don't think they were little onions that you put in the cocktails. Okay. So that was what everyone was focusing on in this interview with one of Will's competitors. I misspoke, not one of his teammates, one of his competitors. And there's something more interesting about the interview, though, and the pictures that were uncovered and the details about Will Thomas's personal life. There's a bunch of weird satanic stuff. There's a bunch of really weird sexual stuff that was, if not posted by Will Thomas, at least liked by Will Thomas on Instagram. Things that talked about autogynephilia. Autogynephilia is one of the explanations for transgenderism. There are within, I was going to say historically, but because the whole phenomenon is so modern, there have been proposed in recent decades two types of transgenderism. Homosexual men who view themselves as women, and also men who are sexually aroused by the thought of them having female genitals, and that's called autogynephilia. So Will Thomas seems to have liked some of these posts about autogynephilia, which might suggest that Will Thomas's identity is a little weirder, is a little more sexual in nature. But then what I find even more interesting than that is all the weird satanic imagery. So one post liked by Will Thomas jokes that will bring about the, quote, collapse of Western civilization. Another one is a picture of Will as a demonic dominatrix character. There are posts that refer to Will Thomas as being in a polycule. That's a group of sexually confused people who all do weird stuff with one another. In fact, the person who wrote Nice Polycule is a user named Crybaby Hellbitch. Beyond Crybaby Hellbitch, there is another transgender identifying person who has photos in a very sexualized, abusive, kind of fetishistic way. Gory and stunning, as one commenter writes. And so I'm not making any particular claims about Will Thomas or any of Will Thomas's friends or friends with benefits or more than friends. I just can't help but notice something that I've noticed for a long time. It's always the same imagery. It always gets back to weird, devil, demonic, horns and tails and pitchforks kind of imagery. I made this point at the Grammys when Sam Smith got on stage dressed like a lesbian Lucifer and jiggled around with a bunch of androgynous, transsexual-looking people. And the clip ended up going viral because my publicists over at Media Matters were very shocked and offended that I made the point that very often depictions of the demonic are quite androgynous or trans, and depictions of transgenderism and androgyny are quite often demonic, which is just true. So when Media Matters posted it, I just retweeted it. I thought, yeah, that's very true. What a great point I made. It's always this kind of imagery, isn't it? Isn't that a little bit odd? Isn't that a little bit weird? It's almost as though you can't really separate the physical from the metaphysical. It's almost as though symbols matter. And so the reason that people with these weird sexual desires keep going back to the same symbolism, the same symbols that we've seen all the way back to antiquity, with the bad guy, the little bad red demon with the horns and the pitchfork and the tail and the fangs and the goatee and whatever, all of these symbols, is because they might actually represent something. Why do we talk about people who struggle with these kinds of psychological problems as having demons? Today, we think that we're just speaking metaphorically. Oh, it's just a metaphor. It's a metaphor for chemicals going off in their brains. Well, I don't even know what that means. I mean, if we're talking about metaphor, we're talking about something beyond the physical world. But all of us, I don't care how hardened a materialist you are, you behave as though there is something beyond the material world. You behave as though there is some kind of moral order. You behave as though there are things that are immaterial that still matter, like loves and joys and mathematics and all the intangible things that you can't quite touch or smell or see, but nevertheless you know are there. And you know those things are often represented by physical objects. We all behave that way. And so I just think we need to pay a little more attention to symbols. I mentioned at the top of the show that I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. I'm actually rather grounded and always seek a rational explanation when one is available to me. But I also can't help but notice things. And I find that's especially true when we're talking about symbols. The modern world refuses to acknowledge symbols. In fact, it explicitly denies symbolism because in its thought, if not in its behavior, it tries to deny that there's any metaphysical reality beneath the physical world. But for Christians or Jews or Muslims or even pagans or anybody with any even quasi-traditional understanding of religion and man's place in the universe, there is no such thing really as coincidence. There is a broader providence. There is meaning, okay? So if you believe that there is meaning, then there has got to be meaning to the fact that all these sexual deviants keep going back to the same image of that same old devil. It's got to mean something. The rest of the show continues now. You do not want to miss it. Go to dailywire.com/Knowles. Use code Knowles at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.